What is up, people? Dunna here. Welcome back to another video. I'm super excited about this one because it involves you. Specifically, I'm going to be color grading your footage. Taking a clip like this and turning it into something like this. Or maybe something like this and turning it into something wild like this. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I got there. So over on my Instagram, where you should be following me already, I reached out and I got a bunch of submissions and I've pared it down to just a couple that we're going to go through today. Let's hop over to Davinci Resolve and I'll show you what we're working with. Okay, we got some chill beats to color grade to. We have secured the cup. Ow. I just hit my tooth. Apparently I have a little too much energy from all the coffee I've been drinking. And of course we have Davinci Resolve open with our clips loaded up. I've got 4 here, one of this really cool lava from an active volcano. I think this was shot on the Mavic 2 Pro. I'm surprised it didn't melt. We got this truck on the beach, super epic, looks like an ad. We got this shot of the boat out on the water. This looks like it could be from something like a Bond film or something. And then we've got this person making some kind of cool wood craft. I'll throw up the Instagram handles on the screen for everyone who submitted this footage, but let's get into it. Obviously, the first thing that I think of when I see active volcanoes like this is Mordor. So we're gonna try and make this as kind of dark and moody as possible. Let's kick things off with some primary corrections. I'm gonna label this Pry, and I'm just gonna dig right in on my curves here. Just give it a little bit of contrast. I'm gonna throw on another node and I'm gonna call this one color. There's some blue going on in this kind of cloud here that I'd like to get rid of. I'd like it basically to be like black and white and red. So in our color node, I'm gonna go over to my hue versus saturation. I'm gonna throw a point on the blue. I'm gonna pull it way down. We throw a point on red and bump it up a little bit even. I'm gonna go over to my hue versus hue, throw a point on the red as well, and just kind of get the color of that dialed in. It doesn't need much though, maybe just a little bit like that. So I made my red just a little bit more red, a little bit more kind of blood red. And then I think what I'm going to do too is go into my hue versus luminance. I'm going to grab a red and a yellow, and I'm actually going to make the red a little bit like of a deeper color. And then like right in the middle here in the orange, I'm going to make that a little bit brighter. It's going to give us just a little bit of contrast between the two. Now back in my primaries, I'm just pushing my blacks a little too close to the bottom there. I don't want to get too close right off the bat because we're going to add like a dark and moody look afterwards. Just giving myself a little bit of room to play with, and I think we're looking pretty good. All right, next thing I want to do on another node is I want to just make this whole sky area a little darker. It doesn't look as like ominous and maniacal as I want it to because the sky is still so bright. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our qualifier here. I'm going to crank up the luminance. I'm going to add my highlight mode here so I can see. We're going to get just everything that's kind of up in that top area there. Denoise it a bit, a little bit of a blur radius. And now when I affect my gain and my gamma, should only affect the stuff up top there. I think I went a little too far with it though. So right now we're getting a little too much of everything in order to make it feel kind of natural. So what I'm also going to do is add a power window, add a gradient one here, pull this out a little bit, and just kind of have it very gradual now I can kind of exaggerate this a little bit without it getting onto our main subject too much there. So we've got this kind of daytime, and then it kind of looks a little bit more dark and moody. And going back to my primary here, I feel like we could probably make the whole scene just a little bit darker using the gamma. There we go. And then the last thing I want to do is make this kind of middle section pop a little bit more. So I'm going to add one more node, and I'm going to add a power window, a circular one. Really feather it out. I don't want it to be obvious at all that this even exists. And then I'm going to crank up my contrast a little bit, my mid detail a little bit, and then push my gamma a little bit to make it kind of popped out a little bit more. Pull down my lift. There we go. And then what we're going to do is we're going to track this with that section. So we're going to go over to the tracker. We're on the first frame right now, and I'm going to track it forward. And it does a pretty darn good job. So we turn off that power window viewer. That looks pretty darn epic. So backing up to what we started with, going through the steps here, we've got our primary corrections, we've got our color adjustments, which were pretty minimal, and we've got darkening the sky, and then we've got that little pop in the center there. One more time for good measure. Epic. All right, moving on. So next we have another drone shot, this one from Jed Dobre, something like that. Anyway, so we've got this epic shot of this truck on a beach. Beautiful. Looks like an ad for whatever truck this is. I'm gonna park it right about there where I've got some red from the truck, the color of the sand, the blue from the water, and we're gonna start with the same place, primary corrections. So I actually like where my highlights are at. Things are looking pretty good as far as the spread that we've got going on. So maybe I'll add a little bit of contrast, pull down my gamma a little bit, just kind of deepen that red. That's pretty nice. And maybe we could just warm this up a little bit with the offset. There, that's looking pretty good. Let's throw in another node here. We're gonna call this one color. I know right off the bat, I'm gonna wanna go into my hue versus hue, grab a blue, just make it just a bit more teal. There we go, that's feeling nice. Worked for both the sky and the water there. And then in the hue versus saturation, I'm just gonna grab the red, and I'm gonna crank up the saturation just a little bit, make sure that that red really pops. And I'm also gonna go back to hue versus hue, grab my red again, and I'm just gonna make my red a little bit more on the kind of orangey red side. And what the heck, hue versus luminance, I'm also gonna kind of deepen that red a little bit. So we've got our primary corrections and then our color. And we're already getting pretty close to that kind of like teal and orange type look. So I'm gonna add another node and I'm gonna do a power window for it. And we're gonna go really soft. Bring up my gamma a little bit. Actually, I'm gonna bring down my gamma a little bit. Up the gain a little bit. I'm basically adding contrast into just the area where the truck is. If we want to just look at that, we can look at it this way. Really making that truck stand out and really softening the effects of my mask here. All right, I'm gonna track this, although because the camera moves around the subject, it might get a little messed up, but we'll see. It's not bad. Let's go back to here and track it forward. So it's pretty good. But back here, if we go over to frame, we can make some adjustments. Now we can get rid of our power window. We don't need to be looking at it anymore. I'm almost thinking that the whole shot could be a little brighter now. I'm going to go back to my primary corrections. Maybe just go to the curves. I'm going to turn on editable splines. I'm just going to bring up that kind of top end a little bit. I love that when you spin around the truck, you really get to see like the color pop out right at that point. And so now what I'm gonna do is from our power window here, I'm gonna do an outside node, which is basically affecting everything except what's in there. And I'm just gonna bring that down just a little bit using the gamma and maybe my gain. It's this funny back and forth where it's like, I just brightened it up and now I'm darkening it back again, but it's making the truck stand out. All right. That's looking pretty darn good. I feel like the last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add one more and just call it warm. And I'm just gonna bring in a little bit of kind of orangey tones to warm the whole thing up a little bit. Just using the offset here. So now it's got a bit more of kind of a golden hour vibe to it. So before, see how the beach is looking pretty cool. And then after, we've got that kind of golden hour vibe now. So before, we did our primary corrections, we did some color corrections, we popped our truck a little bit, we pulled down everything outside the truck, and then we warmed the whole thing up at the end, and we've got this. And before we hop into the next one, coffee break. If you're enjoying this video so far, make sure to go hit that like button. Maybe drop a comment and tell me how excited you are to watch me color grade people's footage. All right, on to the next one. Here we got the boat out over the water. Really cool drone shot again. 3 for 3 drone shots so far. We're gonna start the same place we always start with our primary corrections. Now with this one, I can see over on my waveform that we're actually kind of clipping both the top and bottom. You can see down in this area here, I think we're clipping on all these boats. So I'm gonna see what I can get back with my gain. Looks like there was a bit of information above there. That's nice. And then from the bottom end, so I'm just trying to give myself kind of a working amount of information here. So to get everything back that might have been lost from being crushed to the top or bottom. I'm going to use my gamma here to kind of get things where they need to be. Add a little bit of contrast. Maybe just use my offset here to warm things up a little bit. It looks like a nice warm day. Why shouldn't it be warm? What I'm focusing on here is anything that I see down here that's white and just making sure that it's white. I don't have a lot of white area. Being able to like use my scopes or something like that to try and figure out what's white might be a little bit difficult. What we could do is throw a power window down on something like this, throw the highlight on it, and then try and match up. But as you can see down here, I can't really see much, maybe on the histogram. So these are pretty lined up. So it's looking actually like it's pretty good. So my eyeball in it seems to have worked this time around. It doesn't always, but it did this time. And generally, our primary correction is looking pretty good. So we're gonna add another node. Again, we're gonna call it color. I'm going to go into my hue versus saturation, and we've kind of got two different blues here. We've got our sky blue and then we've got our water blue. So I'm going to be kind of focusing on getting the water the color that I want it, because I've got some fun stuff I want to do a little bit later. So, I'm in my hue versus saturation. Let's try that again. Hue versus hue. This is the one that I'm looking for. Let's get a little bit more of that kind of teal into our water. Let's grab our red here. Get our yellow a little bit more orange. We're gonna get that teal and orange going on here. And I'm gonna hop over to my hue versus saturation. I'm gonna pull the saturation on the whole thing down just a little bit, like that. And then I'm gonna grab my blue and I'm gonna pop it back up again, as well as my red. I'm gonna delete the yellow there so it's getting my red and orange. So before color and after the color. That's looking pretty cool. I think I'm gonna go back into my primary corrections here, and I'm just gonna use my editable splines. I'm just gonna play around with making it a little bit brighter and just a little more contrast. Something like that. Oh dang, doing this on the wrong node. Let's go back and do this here. A little fade kind of makes it look a little more like filmic when I pull up the blacks like that. And that's looking pretty good. I think maybe we got a little too much in the blues here. Let's pull those back. This is looking pretty good. We could honestly just like leave this. Here's the before, here's the after. Looks a little bit more like a Hollywood movie kind of thing with the orange and teal. But what I want to do is something really nuts. We've got this cool gradient in the sky, and I want to make it look like the sky is like on fire, a little bit more of like a sunset type of thing. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna add another node, and I'm gonna call this sky. Then I'm gonna grab my qualifier, and I'm going to start selecting the sky. It's made a pretty solid selection. Luckily, we have a pretty nice solid color to work with up there, but we want to make sure that we're getting all of the sky. So I'm going to start selecting more up in there. And then of course, what happens is we start to get the water, because they do share some colors. So what I want to do is add a power window. We can just add a square one. And if we play through, we can see that the position doesn't change enough. We don't need to track anything. And then we just want to make sure that there's nothing too crazy happening along this line here, this edge. Maybe even kind of blur that line a little bit. Just making an adjustment to my mask here. Once we start affecting it, we'll definitely be able to see if there's problems. And that being said, what I want to do now is add our kind of like sunset effect. So what I'm going to do is go into my lift, gamma, and gain, and I'm going to start pushing in different colors of orange, red, and pink. All right, so we've got this kind of wild sunset type of look. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one more node. It's going to be an outside node, so it's going to affect everything except that sky. And I'm just going to add a bit more of that kind of warm cast so that it looks a little more realistic, because right now with the sky that orange and everything else so nice and clear, it doesn't really make much sense. But if we throw a little bit more of a warm kind of tone over everything, then it looks a little bit more realistic. It definitely doesn't look realistic, and I definitely could still pull back on a lot of the saturation of the sky, but I kind of like it wild like that. Why not, right? And if we play through, that's wild. And you could do insane things. You could replace that sky if you wanted to. You could just change the hue to whatever you wanted. You could automate that so that the sky kept changing throughout the shot. But I like my orangey sunset All right, moving on to our very last clip. This is from @rsvp.pr, Ricardo. Ricardo's been around the channel for a while. This one was shot with his Nikon D5600, I believe. So as always, we're gonna start with our primary corrections. I'm gonna use my curves here to get us in the ballpark of where we need to be. That feels pretty great. Let me brighten it up just a little bit. There we go. Add another node. We're gonna call this color. And I don't even necessarily want to do too much. I might just pull back the saturation overall. Actually, I'm not gonna do it here though. I'm gonna do it in my hue versus saturation. I'm gonna pull down a little bit of everything, but then I'm gonna keep my skin tones up a little bit here. So I'm gonna add a point, and then I'm gonna widen it out like so. Bring my skin tones back up. So basically I've desaturated a little bit of everything except the skin tones. I'm also going to add a little bit of mid detail here. This just gives a little bit of like sharpening to your midtones. That's just going to draw our attention to the hands a little bit more. So far we've gone from this to that. This is looking pretty great as is. You could just leave this if you wanted to, but we're gonna do something a little fun here. I've got a third node, and I'm gonna add a LUT from my upcoming LUT pack that I've got. You know what, maybe by the time that I release this video, I'll get my act together and I'll have this up on my store. I will leave a link down in the description if it's available. And let's take a look at some of these here. So that looks pretty cool. Oat milk looks nice. Let's go with Benedict. It's got this kind of like soft filmic kind of look. Do we like oat milk? No, I like Benedict better. Just kind of softens things out a lot. Gives it this kind of overall look. Pulls a lot of that green off of the table. But that looks fantastic. So yeah, the LUTs are coming, or maybe they're here. You'll have to go look. So this one, again, starting primaries, did some color adjustments, really not a whole lot. And then we slapped on a little LUT. Maybe we'll pull that back just a little bit using our key output. Maybe like a 0.88. Yeah, I like it right about there. There we go. And then we end up with this. And those are the clips. So there it is. It was a lot of fun for me. If it was fun for you, maybe leave a comment down below. Hit that like button, all that good stuff. Huge thank you to everyone that submitted their footage. This will be a good test of like how many clips I can get through in one video, just in case we decide we want to do another one. And like I said, as far as that LUT pack goes, I will leave a link down in the description if I've got all my stuff together and it's ready. If not, I'll leave a little note in there for you to find that just says like, Dunna needs to get his together. It is what it is. As always, leave a comment down below. Let me know how you're doing. And on your way down there, hit that like and subscribe button. Hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on future reviews, tutorials, and weird stuff like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.